Hello, hello, hello. My name is Juliet Armstrong, and on behalf of Power New York, I'd like to welcome you to our very special Black Women's Equal Pay Day with the Gloria Middleton, President of CWA Local 1180. And for those who may not know, that is the country's largest union representing communication and media workers. Ms. Middleton also is on the executive board of the New York City Labor Council and the CUNY Labor Advisory Board. So thank you so much, Gloria, for making the time to talk with us today.
Thank you, Juliet. First, let me say, as president of the Communication Workers of America, Local 1180, we are the largest public sector part of
Mhm.
CWA in New York City. Um, it's a 9,000 membership, as well as we also are responsible for the benefits for 6,000 retirees. So it's a lot of responsibility. How did I get here? Long story, but I'll tell you the short version. Um, I got involved with unions because my father was a longshoreman, so I knew about unions, and that's the only way he was able to take care of 8 children in the
Mhm.
city of New York um, way back when. So when I got a city job, I knew I needed to know my contract and I always read my contract. And then when I got into a certain position, I noticed management wasn't doing the right thing. So always had a big mouth. So well, you need to become a shop steward. I said, nah, I don't want to do that. But then they convinced me, and I did become a shop steward. Um, Gwen Richardson from CWA 1180 at the time, who was the supervisor of staff reps, saw something in me and said, you need to come and work for the union. Started out as a staff rep, went to secretary treasurer. When the president decided that he wanted to retire, he asked me to run for office.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, guess what? I won. Was quite intimidated by it, being the first black woman and
Mhm.
to run for that position and hold have such a large membership. But then, and I say this because I want other black women to hear me.
Mhm.
When I, with all the anxiety, when I finally got it, I heard a voice say, "You can only be you, and you are
Mhm.
good. You are good enough." So, with that, that's how I got here. And of course, 80% of my membership are women and people of color.
Mhm.
So that was my first mission, to make sure that women and women of color, people of color, are paid equal. And I met Beverly, and we started a road.
That is great. I love the comment about being a voice in your head about you are good enough, and in some cases, being a voice in someone else's ear, reminding them that they are good enough. I love that. You know, we all know that you've been a long time champion of pay equity. If I recall correctly, you were the national chair of CWA's Civil Rights and Equity Committee as well, and had a very important role settling a significant lawsuit that was on behalf of the administrative managers for pay disparity based on race and gender. Tell us a little bit about that lawsuit, what became of it, and how it actually came to the forefront.
So it's the lawsuit started with the former president and the former board, of which I was the secretary treasurer at the time,
Mhm.
and there was a group of members that wanted to become part of a union, and we fought for years to get them to become part of the union. We had to go through the Office of Collective Bargaining, because the definition of manager is that you make policy and you
Mhm.
have the ability to hire and fire.
Mhm.
We had middle managers. They didn't do all of that, but um, were they oversaw major centers like the food stamp centers and the welfare centers. They were the managers of those centers, but they were being treated like you know what.
Mhm.
So they came to us, and it was a long battle. And when we finally were able to accrete them, we start looking at the salaries. Well, and in that process, we also got a civil service test to be given to them. And guess who passed the civil service test at that time? We're talking about the 90s and the early 2000s. It was mostly women and
Mhm.
women of color. So when we looked at the salaries, there was a salary range of 50,000 to 150,000. So we said something is wrong here. And then the former president, who had been around for over 40 years, he knew way back when in the day that title was held mostly by white men, back in the day. And as you know, the city served as the city progressed and more people of color started coming into city service, more women and people of color started taking those tests. And they what they did was freeze the minimum salary. They never went up it as we began to become in those positions. But yet,
Interesting.
who were there and who had the seniority and were mostly white males, when we
Mhm.
did the survey, because then we started doing some research. We hired a EEO attorney, and we hired some specialists who did surveys, etc. We found that the people at the high end were who? White males. So the former president sat with the executive board, and because it was going to take money to do this lawsuit, so we sat down and made a decision that we needed to go forward. We started in 2018 during the Bloomberg administration. We settled in 2000 and 2019.
Mhm.
Settled. The case had went to the national EEO, the federal EEO rather, and they said yes, they saw the discrimination. So
Wow.
once it was done and De Blasio was in office, we said, now we know you don't want to go to court, so let's settle
Mm.
it. But of course, it took some time to settle. We didn't settle till December 2019, just before the pandemic, just
Wow.
before, to a tune of $15 million, of which there were like 1,000 or 1,500 administrative managers. So for them, some people went from a $52,000 salary to a
That's
$72,000.
amazing. That's amazing.
Can you imagine what that does for a household?
Absolutely.
Um, that's one of the greatest things that I'm so proud of in my tenure, that I was able to settle. My former president said he was the opener and I was the closer.
That is
Uh,
amazing.
so that's how that went. And, to this day, I still get, thank yous from
Mhm.
those people in those positions saying, what a difference it's made in their lives.
That is fantastic. It's interesting in many ways that lawsuit and the settlement and the success on that is viewed as a precursor to the pay transparency laws that we have on the books today. Tell me a little bit about, in your view, why you think the pay transparency laws are effective in driving gender pay equity.
Well, it requires employers to list a good faith salary range in job postings. It lifts the secrecy of the compensation around job offices, which historically has enabled wage disparity.
Mhm.
Most women, and women of color especially, when they go for a job listing, they're so busy trying to make sure that they get the job, they
Right.
don't to say a higher salary because they figure the job won't accept them. We have
Mhm.
to change that mindset. So we wanted to put this uh, transparency law into effect so people will feel more comfortable going into an interview, just knowing what the pay scale is. Um, and in essence, it affects your past salary, information, so that the employer can't say, well, you didn't make but so much this time, we'll bump you
Right.
up $5,000. Um, so I don't know what's happening with this phone today. So we thought it was a very important bill to be passed, and thankfully, it was passed, and there's still more work to do.
Yeah, what I really thought was impactful about, the pay transparency law, to building on your point, that your salary in your previous job really should not have an impact on what the employer views as a fair salary for the job that you're applying for right now. And the fact that everyone has the same information about what the job pays, it makes it less likely that, people just based on, the information or the people they know will ask for an amount that is very low underselling themselves. So I think it was really helpful there. And what I also thought was kind of interesting is like many people assume or realize that it helps the job seeker or the employee, but there may not be enough understanding that it actually benefits the employers as well. I thought it was very interesting with a study done by Indeed.com, which is obviously one of the nation's like big, job seeker platforms, that their study indicated that job seekers were more likely to apply for positions with companies whose names they didn't quite recognize if there was transparency around the pay, which means that for emerging companies, quickly growing companies, they now have a competitive inroad to terrific talent for people who would never, consider them otherwise. And also, Indeed reported lots of information about just understanding, pay transparency leads to higher retention or longer retention, and more benefits on productivity, on, happiness measures and engagement. So it's one of those rare cases that, you have something that becomes a complete, win-win for, the employees and the companies as well. So
I
it's very
agree.
excited there. So my question then becomes, it just based on the impact and the inroads of the pay transparency law that was passed in 2023, like why are there discussions now about amendments?
Well, the pay transparency bill was a very important first step.
Mhm,
But we need to address some loopholes and strengthen the bill. Um, when we were reviewing, after the law was passed, we started reviewing some of the um, job postings that was put on in public and other places, and we noticed that they were then doing a overly broad range of what the pay
mhm,
compensation would be. It would be like 100,000, let's say 75,000 to 150,000. That's too large.
mhm,
So we need to address overly broad ranges by providing more clarity to the salary range disclosure. We want more of a job description.
mhm,
Exactly does the job entail? That should be on the job posting.
mhm,
So people who are qualified will know that they are qualified and they can address the description that has been posted. And it will help us understand that the salary posting is in accordance to what the job description should be.
mhm,
We need to disclose other forms of compensation. Are there
mhm.
bonuses? Are there benefits? Healthcare is a vital issue for everybody.
Right.
So let's list that because if the job is going to pay for healthcare, we understand why the salary might be as not be as high as a certain amount, or if they don't pay for it, it should be higher because then
Mhm,
I know I have to pay for it.
right.
Um, and we need pay transparency to cover existing employees. They should know what a new
Mhm.
employee is making to make sure that they are being paid the correct salary. We find too many times new people come in at a higher salary than a person who's been doing it for 10 years.
Right.
We don't want
Right.
that to happen anymore.
That is great. And I know that this is like one of the most important initiatives and issues for Power New York. And they've been very much at the forefront working with, organizations like yours, trying to, push these changes through.
Mhm.
Um, what are the next steps in terms of getting these amendments through?
Yes. So an amendment is being proposed right now for New York City law. Council member Selvina Brooks Powers introduced Intro 808 recently,
Mhm,
and they used to have New York State follow with the similar amendments. And what we do is we lobby all the other legislators to ask them to, approve the bill so
mhm.
that, and especially making them understand how much this is needed for New York, and we always lay the great groundwork for other states. So
Right.
it's important that we be the lead on this.
One question I've been, burning to ask you. So there can sometimes be a sentiment that for one group to improve, another group has to lose. So from your perspective, how or does improving pay equity for women impact all workers?
As we say, labor, period, uplifts the middle class,
Hmm.
period. Because even if you're not in a union, if you are doing a certain job and a union person is doing that job at a certain salary, even if that company is not unionized, they cannot ask but for a certain salary for the same type of job.
Mhm.
So it goes the same way with pay equity. Even if it's not a labor organization, it's not a city job, it's a private sector job. If you are doing a certain type of work and a standard is set for that work, it uplifts people no matter whether they are, and I know a lot of people have issues with um, gender identification.
Mhm.
They have issues with, men feel like they still should make more than women. No,
Mhm.
we live in a society where you should have equal pay for equal work, and we will keep saying that until we can't say it no more. uh,
Absolutely. I love it.
mhm,
I love it. So, based on your years and years of work, improving the living standards of all workers, right? And, promoting civil rights and equity and pay equity.
mhm.
What would be your one piece? You probably have lots of advice, but what would be one piece of advice that you'd give to young folks who are looking to, possibly get engaged in the labor movement and, looking to, help make a difference?
Mhm. I can't. I cannot say. I cannot answer your question without saying this first.
Hmm.
First of all, they have to vote.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so let me say that first. You have to vote. I'm gonna say it over and over again. You have to
Hmm.
vote. Many people died for that opportunity for us to be able to vote.
Hmm.
Secondly, in joining the labor movement, find your passion. Find what you like to do, whether it's organizing people, whether it's representing people
Hmm.
who have less than and you want to be a voice for them, whether it is being a leader.
Hmm.
Educate yourself, know what it is to be a leader. Some people have natural leadership abilities. They've had it since they were like in the third grade
Hmm.
because they lead the class to do the wrong thing or the right thing.
Right.
So recognize what your abilities are, and then work on it.
Hmm.
Educate yourself and make sure you become active, be involved.
Hmm.
Um, as the younger people are coming up into activism, I am just so happy about the fact that they are looking at labor as a friend now. Years
Hmm.
ago, unions were a bad thing. Now, since the pandemic, they realized the only people who kept the job was the people in the union.
Right.
So young people are knocking at our doors saying they want to unionize, especially in the nonprofit world.
Hmm.
So I'm encouraged by that, and I keep encouraging young people to be involved, stay active, and not only just on a presidential election, but know who your community leaders are. That's
Right.
where your comes from in your communities. So, and that's where schools get funded. That's where, you know, different things that you want to happen in your communities happen at that level. So, I encourage young people to just stay active.
That is fantastic. And
Mhm.
before we leave here, any additional closing remarks? Although I will, before we leave, repeat what you just said: vote, 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 and vote. Any other closing thoughts?
Um, Basically, I kind of said it in my last question.
Yeah.
I just want to encourage the generations to come to stay involved. Don't settle for what some of our generation and former generations
Hmm.
settled for. Become the activists, but also learn from your elders as well.
Yes.
Uh, we need to learn from each other
Hmm.
because I have information to give you and you have information to give me because this technical world, I don't know nothing. I have to
Right.
go to some people and ask them, okay, how do I do this? And let's become partners in this fight to be progressive.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think I'll end with that.
Oh,
Yes.
I love that. I love the sentiment of, because I know I benefit from like previous generations and the work and the sacrifices they made. And what I try to do, and I hope other generations try to do, is like, what can we do for future generations? Everyone kind of takes a turn at, pushing the agenda and because everyone benefits from it. So I love that. So, Miss Gloria Middleton, on behalf of Power New York, I just really want to thank you for your time and for your wisdom and your insights, and of course, everything that you do for, workers across the board and your years of service. I'd like to encourage everyone listening to learn more, not only about equal pay, but the pay transparency laws by visiting the Power New York website. I know that'll be on the screen. And you can learn more about the pay transparency law and understand resources you have and what to do if you're encountering issues, whether you live in the city of New York or the other wonderful parts of our state. And we'd love to, Power New York, love to hear from you to hear about, things that are working well for you for the pay transparency or like challenges that you've had. So we want to stay in touch. So thank you so much, Gloria, on behalf of everyone from Power New York. Thank you so much for everything you do and for your time today.
Thank you for having me again.
Take care.